Hi everyone, I'm Lisselle.
And I'm Nate.
We're nursing students at the University of Portland.
And today we're going to talk to you a little bit about trauma-informed care and why we think it's so important in your workplace.
So before I tell you about trauma-informed care, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about ACEs. So what are ACEs? ACEs are adverse childhood experiences. ACEs look at traumatic events an individual may have been exposed to in the past, such as abuse, neglect, family dysfunction, poverty, and racism. They are measured as an ACE score, which allows one to communicate sensitive information without all the details. 62% of adults have more than one ACE score, and the higher your ACE score, the higher your incidence of substance abuse, chronic illness, mental illness, and even relationship problems. Hurt people often hurt people, and it becomes sort of a generational problem, which is why we try to take an upstream approach at eliminating the hurt.
So now that you've heard a little bit about ACEs, let me tell you about why we care about them. ACEs are directly correlated with an increased risk in health, chronic stress, and other healthcare related issues in the United States. So let's dive a little deep into stress and let me tell you a little bit about it. So there's two kinds of stress. There's acute stress and there's chronic stress. Acute is fantastic. It's what wakes you up in the morning when your alarm blares. It's what helps you get work done on a deadline. And it's what helps you run away from a bear when it's chasing you in the woods. Okay? Chronic stress, which is acute stress on a long-term level, is what's detrimental to your body. Let me give you an example of acute versus chronic stress. So picture a young child walking in the woods, and a bear pops out of the bushes. The young child is going to run and scream because his acute stress or a stress response has been activated. His heart's pumping, his blood pressure's going up, their pupils are dilated, and he's running and screaming away. And that's perfect because it helps you escape the bear, right? But what if that bear was in their household every day, and sometimes it came home intoxicated, or it showed constant disappointment, or it was constantly expecting more of the kid? Then day in and day out, it becomes a chronic stress response, and that is what's bad for the body. Acute good, chronic bad. So now let me give you another example. Picture the same kid. He comes to school late, a couple days a week, and the teacher is unenthused, and she constantly asks, "Why are you late? Where have you been?" What the teacher may not know is that the mother is being abused, and she has 4 other kids to drop off at school, all in different areas, and she has to make their lunch in the morning because she has to deal with the bear coming home late every night intoxicated. The teacher doesn't need to know this just to say, "We're glad you're here, and now we can start." And this is very relevant to the work setting that you will be in and when your clients come in. When they come into your office, some of them will be prepared. They'll know what's going on. They'll have the paperwork, and they will have been through the system before, so they know the progression of things. Others will come in and they won't be aware of what's going on. They just need resources and they need your help. So I encourage you, as a provider, to be understanding and to meet them where they're at. And instead of asking, "Why are you late?" or "Why are you unprepared?" encourage them and just be, "I'm glad you're here, and let's move on from this point forward."
So with all this, you may be wondering, why be trauma-informed? Trauma survivors are in that fight or flight mode that Nate was talking about more often than people who have not experienced any trauma. They're more sensitive to triggers in their environment, and they need mentors and supporters to nurture and guide them. That's where we come in. With trauma-informed care, acting out, resistance, and dropouts are reduced, coping strategies are developed, and clients are not re-victimized. Trauma-informed care can be applied to any client population and can benefit both clients and staff. Essentially, it's a way to promote a culture in which all people feel that they're safe and valued.
So now that we've talked a little bit about ACEs and trauma-informed care, let's talk about how to be trauma-informed. I'll start with these 4 key principles and we'll dive in from there. Okay? The first principle is safety. Naturally, who would have guessed? This is not just your client's safety, this is your safety as well. And the rest of these principles will lead into how to maintain a safe environment. The second principle is trust and transparency. Think about how you conduct yourself, your verbiage. You want to make sure that your patient trusts you, and you want to trust your client as well. Maintain a neutral environment at all times helps to avoid any ACE-related reaction. The third principle is peer support and collaboration. In order for the ship to sail, everybody must be on board. So we would like everybody to practice trauma-informed care. If somebody does not, or if one individual that works for Bridgeview does not, it may ruin a client's view of Bridgeview or perspective, and they may cease to return. Our fourth point, or principle, is empowerment, voice, and choice. Think of when the first time you walked into a hospital setting, for example. Did you know what was going on? Did you feel like you had power or a choice or a voice in the matter? My guess is not necessarily, right? And I'm sure your client feels the same way walking into Bridgeview and not necessarily knowing what's going to happen. So you want to make sure that you are giving them a voice, you are lending them courage, and instead of walking ahead, per se, you're walking with them and guiding them through the process.
An easy tool to think about with trauma-informed care is the 5 R's. The first R is to realize. We must realize the impact of trauma, the effect of ACEs on behavior, and potential paths for healing. The second R is to recognize the signs and symptoms of trauma in people. Examples include, but are not limited to, anxiety, irritability, mood swings, poor concentration, and emotional outbursts. The third R is to respond by integrating this knowledge into policies and practice. Being trauma-informed is only really helpful if you're applying what we're teaching you at Bridgeview. The fourth R is to resist the re-traumatization of clients. We'll dive into some specific ways you can go about doing this in a bit. And finally, the last R is to nurture and acknowledge the resilience that often comes natural to those who have experienced trauma in their lives.
All right, so now I just want to recap and talk about a few more key points for your organization. The first is that we want to orient ourselves to the right language. Remember, we don't want to ask, what is wrong with you? We always want to ask, what has happened? And I'm glad that you're here. Now we can carry out from this point forward. Again, we want to remember that the stress response is totally normal. I experience stress, as do you, as do your clients, as does everybody else in the world. It's a normal part of life, right? Although some people have a higher stress tolerance or threshold, the clients that we are speaking with may have a significantly lower. Sometimes I have a lower one too, depends on what time I wake up in the morning. Remember that you want to focus on their strengths of the client. Also, we want to walk alongside instead of ahead in order to make them feel like they are empowered and they have a say in the conversation. We want to attain also feedback from our clients to better our practice and to tailor your work. You want to consider your environment. Are there any things in your office or in the space that you're speaking with your client that may trigger an ACE-related reaction? Is your environment inviting or neutral? To take all these things into consideration when you are meeting with your client.
Trauma impacts a person's attention, sequencing, language, and even memory. Clients may come in with disorganized thoughts or have a hard time processing what you're telling them. One trauma-informed way that you can respond to this is to connect with clients before coaching or correcting them. Building a rapport is an essential way to build that sense of trust in your relationship. Respect boundaries and ensure that your client knows that he or she can leave the room as necessary to calm or regulate themselves. Let your client also know that any feedback that he or she may have to help make the room a more comfortable place to work is welcome. When coaching them, break instructions up into chunks and create a written to-do checklist to help them process what you're telling them. Finally, if your client appears to have a lot on his or her mind, encourage them to use a form of self-expression that does not require language, such as coloring or drawing, while you're talking to them, as this has been proven to be quite therapeutic.
So what happens when, despite your efforts, the scenario continues to escalate and there's nothing you can do, or it feels like there's nothing you can do? Well, there is. And first and foremost, you need to remember to stay calm and acknowledge the individual's feelings. This is personal and it's something they're feeling from the past. Note that it's not necessarily your fault for eliciting this reaction, but you can do something about it. Invite them to calm down, take a deep breath, step out of the room. Those are a few initial things that you can try. Use simple words and stay, again, calm. You can sometimes provide them with an activity to engage the cortex, which is the reasoning part of the brain, such as a coloring book, just while you're continuing your discussion, or a math problem. This helps to take their mind off of that traumatic event that may have happened in the past. Or you can simply change the subject for a little while and talk about something that brings them joy. Note that personal resilience requires personal balance, and in order to adequately deal with a situation like this at work, you must come in well rested, take time for self-care, and be recharged and ready to go. Although a flip delayed is typically a situation that you want to avoid happening, you can mitigate it, and it may pose an opportunity to deepen a relationship with the client that you're discussing with. We need a paradigm shift from traditional methods to trauma-informed care. And what I mean by that is typically traditional methods do not lead to some sort of relationship with a client that you're discussing with. Trauma-informed care, however, takes into consideration their past and gives you context so that when you develop a relationship, it's rooted deeper. So with that said, I hope you all understand the importance of trauma-informed care and how necessary it is to practice in the workplace.
We hope you enjoyed our presentation and wish you the best of luck at Bridgeview.
Until next time,
Thanks for listening.